I'm Leon Todd for G66. Welcome to another Tuesday Tone Tip. On today's video, we're on firmware 30.01 for the Axe FX3, and I want to show you a couple of tips and tricks for the new 7-band pedal type in the graphic EQ block. This is based on the beloved Boss GE7, probably the world's most popular graphic EQ. And as you would imagine, for a pedal that has been around for so long and used by so many players in so many different situations, there's a lot of great tips and tricks that have been discovered with this pedal. My personal favorite one is just using it as a preamp boost to make your guitar a little bit hotter. So if you want a bit more gain from the amp, you've got 7 different EQ bands in here. They're kind of voiced for guitar. So you can pump up, say, the 800 Hertz band, a little bit of 1.6 and a little bit of 400 around it, turn up the level in here, and you're going to be adding a really nice crunch to the front of your amp. This is an old Gibson ES335 TD, as you can hear from the scratchy pot on there. Let's have a listen to what this does into the Class A 30-watt Brilliant amp model on the bridge pickup. These work great in front of a high gain amp like the Friedman HBE as well. You can take it a little bit further and say cut out some of the low end. I'll pull 100 Hertz and 200 Hertz down a little bit and even smooth out the high end on here. I'm going to push 1.6 a little bit harder on there. Let's hear it with the Friedman. Now, you can, of course, achieve this with a number of different EQ types in here, whether it's a parametric EQ, a filter block, or any of the other graphic EQ types in here. I find, though, that because the GE7 was designed and voiced for guitar, that it's just a really familiar starting point. And I think most of us have probably come across a real GE7 in the wild at some point in our guitar playing. So this is a really nice reference point to have in here. I also like that you can take it beyond the original pedal. It's really easy to zero everything out with this zero all button. You can change up the master Q on here as well. I've gone back to this Class A 30-watt Brilliant over here because I want to try out these settings that I think were popularized by Tom Bukovac, an amazing Nashville session player. He's got a video talking about the GE7 where he says, you know, if you've got a neck humbucker on something like a 335 and you want to make it sound a little bit more like a Gretsch, you can dip some 400 Hertz, you can boost some 3.2K over here. It's basically going to take out some of the mud and add a little bit of chime on here. And I find it works really well, especially with this guitar. I think these are the old T-top pickups. cater the amount of cut or boost on here to personal preference. If your neck pickup's a little muddier sounding, go harder with the 400 Hertz. If it's a little brighter sounding, you probably don't need as much of this 3.2K on there. Next up, let's try some really outrageous settings on here. I've seen this one posted around on the internet before as kind of like a dobro or resonator style simulator on here. So you start by completely cutting 100 Hertz, but completely boosting 200 Hertz, and you kind of just repeat that pattern across there. It's one of these things where a pedal being such a tactile interface and having sliders in particular, it's probably going to make you do things that you wouldn't do with knobs. Again, you just play around with it. You're like, oh, what happens if I do this little pattern on there? I think this sounds really, really cool. I'll start out on the neck pickup again, and then I'll go to the bridge while I'm playing. That is a very cool way to approximate that resonator sound using an EQ block. And apologies for having to put up with me playing slide guitar. We'll move right along and I'll stay on the DGT. The last setting on here is trying to set up an out-of-phase single coil sound. So the DGT has a full-size humbucker here that you can tap. So on the neck pickup, it's really nice for something close to a traditional Strat neck pickup tone. Really like that. However, one thing that you miss without having a middle single coil is that classic so-called out-of-phase sound where you might have the neck and the middle single coils on together. Well, we can try to emulate that because what it's really doing is it's kind of thinning out the sound quite a bit and it's pumping up just a tiny amount of mid-range on there. So if you just basically give it this little set of stairs here, we'll take out all of 100 Hertz and we'll build it up slowly to 1.6K, then we'll just push it down a little bit on here. I'm taking out some 6.4K so it doesn't get too bright. What we'll do is we will hear the neck humbucker, then that neck humbucker tapped, and then I'll bring in the EQ block to try to emulate that Strat neck and middle pickup sound. Now, there are obviously loads of other classic settings with the GE7. I would love to hear from all of you if you've used the real pedal before. What are some of your go-to settings that you would replicate in the Fractal? And what other EQ tricks do you like to use either with the graphic EQ, the filter, or the parametric EQ, feel free to share them in the comments section below. If you want access to my blocks library or you want to grab my free IR, I will link those in the video description. Otherwise, have a great week, and I'll see you all on next Tuesday's Tuesday Tone Tip.